If you want to pump your body and expand your mind, there's only one place to go. Mind Pump. Mind Pump with your hosts, Sal DiStefano, Adam Schaefer, and Justin Andrews.
So in this episode, you're going to hear us talking to Mark Bell. Now, we do record these intros after the interview, and I'll tell you, we had a good time. We had a good time meeting with him.
No, it was a really good time, and I think, God, we did three
hours on his podcast,
right.
2 hours on ours.
This was a long day.
It was.
A lot to talk about.
I was impressed with his operation, too. We show up to his facility, and we were treated with incredible hospitality. His staff was on point.
Mm-hmm.
The store in the front was amazing. The gym was, if you're a strength athlete,
it was impeccable.
That's a gym.
What a great gym.
That's a gym for strength athletes.
I also really appreciate how Mark and his team and everybody handle everything, because I've given him a lot of shit the last couple of years on this podcast when talking about his interview, because he was one of the first interviews we did, and he did it in his car.
We were a little salty there for a while.
Right? And so and Sal brought it up in this interview, so you'll hear it at one point. Sal calls it right out, and we talk about it. And so I think that I really appreciate how Mark handles it. I think that he was a great sport about it. Since then, we've been texting back and forth. So got a lot of respect for the guy. I know we have a lot of mutual friends everybody that we keep running into.
He's pretty well liked in our space.
Very well liked.
I can see why. He's a likable guy. He definitely cares a lot about helping people. So that comes through.
You can find him on Instagram at Mark Smelly Bell. His website is Mark Bell Slingshot. Of course, he's the inventor of the Slingshot, which a brilliant piece of equipment that you put around your arms that helps you improve your bench strength. I know Justin's messed around with it.
I've been messing around. I love it so far.
Yeah, it's really good. His podcast is Mark Bell's Power Project. Also, I want to remind everybody that in February, this month, all month long, MAPS Performance, this is our functional-based training program. This is for people who want to move like well-rounded athletes and want to look like a well-rounded athlete. There's a lot of core work, a lot of rotational work, a lot of unconventional exercises, a special focus on mobility. It's the program I think everybody should do, especially people who are serious about their overall fitness. It's half off, so 50% off MAPS Performance. It's also getting revamped. So if you have MAPS Performance now, or if you enroll it with the 50% off sale, when it gets updated, you'll get the automatic update at no additional cost. So here's what you do for the discount. Go to mapsfitnessproducts.com and use the code GREEN50, GREEN 50, no space, for 50% off. And on that site is our other MAPS programs and MAPS bundles for different goals, different targets, different experience levels. You can find all those at mapsfitnessproducts.com. So without any further ado, here we are talking to Mark Bell. Well, Mark, you've been training at a high level for a very, very long time. You're not an old guy, but you're not a spring chicken. What are some of in your experience? What are some of the benefits that come along with age? We all know what the detriments are, right? You can't recover as fast. You get aches and pains.
Can't get it up.
You can't. I swear to God, I was
not as handsome.
Yeah, all that stuff. But what are some of the benefits? What have you experienced that have come along with age now that you can say that gives you an advantage over 25-year-old Mark Bell?
I would say probably the biggest advantage is just being more accurate, and doing the lift the right way. When I was young, maybe I didn't know or didn't care, and I just wanted to kind of get in there and get after it. But I think accuracy and efficiency are huge. They're really important. You want to try to get the most out of the least, try to, get as much as you possibly can from that workout that you possibly could. And stimulating the central nervous system, which is just, this idea of trying to get stronger. It doesn't look like what most people think it looks like.
How do you mean?
It just doesn't you don't have to be a maniac to do it. You're not going to go to jail. And you're not going to go to hell if you do the exercise with proper form and technique. You actually are going to make so much more progress when you do the lift the right way. And, I think a good internal dialogue to have with yourself is, okay, I'm going to go through this particular workout for the day. You want to start to think about what is your intent of the day? What are you trying to do? Even if you don't program for yourself, even if I followed Mind Pump, something that you guys wrote, And I said, okay, well, they said they wanted me to do some explosive stuff. So what's the intent of the day? The intent of the day is to move fast. All right, well, that's the intent of the day. Well, let me get my body, mind, and spirit all wrapped around this concept and this idea. So as I've gotten older, I've kind of understood this idea of let me get some pre-workout in. And I'm not talking about a supplement. I'm talking about pre-workout as in it's Monday and I'm thinking about last Monday's workout when I missed it. So it's when that Monday rolls around again, I'm thinking about it on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday, thinking about that whole week. And I start thinking about, okay, why did I miss that squat? Why did I miss that bench press? Or maybe it's because I just didn't eat enough, or maybe that wasn't, I haven't been sleeping for shit. You start to kind of analyze some things. So I've learned to just, I guess, be, patience is a huge virtue in life and in the gym. And then in addition to that is having an intent of the day, having a purpose behind each thing that you do and having efficiency and accuracy with that.
Now, before, what was different? You would just go in and just berserk, I'm going to go after this and crush it and forget about it.
Yeah. So I thought like if you were going to do a set of 5, I thought it was like an all-out set of 5. I thought that you shouldn't be able to do 6. But really, and this comes with lifting maturity though too. So this is a blessing of having lifted for many years. Once you've lifted for many years, you can potentially, and maybe it won't work for everybody, but you can potentially get more out of less due to a lot of different factors. But I think a good idea for most people is to try to think about how many repetitions can they do in a workout with bad form. And this is something that you want to think about if you're doing a 5x5 or you're doing 3 sets of 3, or somebody says, hey, I want to see you do 8 sets of 4 of this, 78% of your max or whatever. Well, the percentage is nice. It's nice they gave you a recommendation, but forget about the percentage. Let's see what it looks like. Because your interpretation of how you do 4 reps and my interpretations of 4 reps might look completely different. And this was laid out really, really well by Jim Wendler in his book 531, where he talks about, look, man, I don't want you to die on your set of 5. I want to see a good, clean set of 5. Maybe you could have done 7. Maybe you could have done 8. But I don't want rep number 1 of set number 1 to look like you're going to die when I'm asking you to do 2 or 3 sets of 5. And then same thing as you progress each week and you start to move into doing sets of 3 and sets of 1. He always wanted you to kind of leave a little bit of room. A lot of people will say, you're kind of leaving a little bit of room in the tank. You got a little bit extra. And I think that's an important concept. It's an important concept for all aspects of life, and it's hugely important in the gym. When you think about this idea of you want to go in there and get a good, strong training session in, and you're trying to get stronger. Well, a huge important factor of getting stronger is how are you going to recuperate from this workout? So you want to get in there, but you want to stick and move. You don't want to stay on the inside for too long because you're going to get caught by something, and you're going to get caught by a dangerous punch at some point, and it's going to knock your ass out. You're going to end up being knocked out of the game. And as soon as you get hurt, or as soon as and there's many different versions of getting hurt. You can even just hurt and impede your recovery, not necessarily just have pure injury.
Hurt your progress.
Yeah, you hurt your progress. You hurt yourself. You fucked up. You messed up. Like you had this opportunity. You're going in there to try to be better, and you made yourself worse. And you can actually, you could see this from fatigue. Obviously, in a given workout, you get fatigued so much you can't do a push-up or something like that, right? But this happens over periods of time too, where you fatigued yourself so much that your body's like, hey man, you're going crazy, man. I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't agree with this. We're not doing it this way. And so a good conversation to have with yourself is these guys recommended for me to do 3 sets of 3 on a deadlift. What should that look like from me? And maybe for you, maybe you do have a hard time keeping your back flat. And so maybe for you in particular, maybe your back can be a little bit rounded. Maybe there's a little bit of leeway that you get. That's fine. But is it going to look like all 3 sets of 3 are hitched and you got the music cranking and you're going berserk on every single rep? Or should it look like, wow, you got through those 3 sets of 3 pretty easy. Maybe you should do the same thing next week and just add a little bit of weight.
It sounds like you're communicating a lot of the skill that goes into lifting, not just the brute muscle contracting force. Like you're going in there to practice a skill. Like if I were to practice shooting a basket, I'm trying to perfect the skill. Now, you recently competed in bodybuilding, different kind of training. How different is the skill aspect in the workout? Like, are you approaching the workouts differently? Does the frequency look different? Is it more perfecting an exercise with strength versus perfecting the feel for bodybuilding, which is what people traditionally believe? Like, what was different for you through that process?
I think I have some different thoughts when it comes to some of these things. Number one, to build up strong ligaments and tendons, there's been some research that shows you can do, sets of 20 and sets of 30 and so on, and do like really high amount of repetitions. And that can be effective, and it can get a lot of blood flow to the area, and it gets blood flow like deep into the tissues and stuff like that. But additionally, if you want to talk about someone with strong tendons and strong ligaments, that's going to be somebody that can show you their 1 rep max strength with a huge weight, because that kind of gives you an indication of like, okay, well, everything's all tied together pretty good. And this guy just benched 700 pounds raw. And so I think there's some misconceptions surrounding a lot of these things. There's misconceptions even when it comes to injury. Oh, when you're injured, you should use lighter weight and do higher reps. And then actually think about that for a second. I just told you that my shoulder's fucking killing me. And then now you just told me to do 3 sets of 20 on the bench. It's like, man, that's a lot of time under tension. Is that a wise move? Now, if I did it with extremely light weights, maybe we're onto something here. If I did it with really, really light weights and I used a slow eccentric and I was trying to rehab the injury, then maybe we're talking about something a little bit different. But I'm a big believer of get the hell out of there. Get out of being underneath the bar when it comes to recovering from an injury, when it comes to strength training. Now, when it comes to trying to build some muscle, we do need to have a little bit more time under tension. But this is where heavy weights still can come into favor, because it's going to take you longer to lift a heavier weight. There's so many different versions of where you can get your volume from. And you just need volume. You need an overall, in school, they used to say, show me your work when you did math. Lifting is the same way. At the end of the day, you're going to have to show somebody your work, and you're going to have a body of work that represents the goal that you have in mind at the end of the day. And it doesn't really matter how you got there, but you're going to need something. And so in order to like build mass for a bodybuilding show, or even be lean for a bodybuilding show, I'd say that the diet becomes probably the most important thing.
Oh, huge, I'm sure.
And then there's like some touch-up stuff that you can do in terms of the movements, in terms of like cable crossovers and like sit-ups and some different things. And I'm a big believer in that. A lot of people don't believe in like spot reduction and stuff like that. But I believe when you start talking about an on-stage bodybuilder and you start talking about the mind-muscle connection, I think we're talking about a different animal. And I think that stuff does exist. And I think guys like Charles Glass and many of the top coaches have kind of proven this theory, where they're making people's Christmas tree, their spinal erectors pop out just that much more the last few weeks before the show, because the guy's drying out and they're refining it with higher repetition stuff. But to answer the question very plainly, like my workouts did not change that much, because I believe the real stimulus towards looking like a bodybuilder comes more from your diet than it does from your training.
So what led you to hire Hani? You hired Hani, right?
Hani Ramban.
Why Hani?
He came on Mark Bell's Power Project, and he called me out. So he came on my podcast.
Oh, that's how that happened.
Yeah, he came on my podcast, and he was like, hey, man, he's like, you gotten in some great shape. And I was like, oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And he's like, you owe it to your fans. You got to take it all the way. You got to do a bodybuilding show. And I was like, okay. I was like, I said, I don't know anything about bodybuilding.
You never thought about this before? This is totally, wow.
No, never. I've never even been to a bodybuilding show. The only bodybuilding show I've ever been to was my own.
Huh, what a great way for him to promote himself.
I know.
Really? I'm going to get this guy who everybody knows to compete.
Well, that's 100% on what he was thinking. And I'm glad that he did, because I'm still in better shape for it. I'm still in better shape from that show, which was in August. And I kind of had this agreement with myself going in that I wasn't going to weigh more than 10 pounds more than that, like a month out. I allowed myself to rebound up a little bit after the show. About 20 pounds or so. But I said, about a month out from the show, I want to make sure I'm within 10 pounds of striking distance of that weight. And then right now I weigh the exact same as I did on stage.
Now I'm curious about what your experience was like, because for a while there, when I first was competing, I was also coaching, and I actually coached a lot of bikini competitors and some bodybuilders.
I bet you did.
Yes, I did, and a lot of men's physique athletes.
It's motivating.
And Hani and I don't know each other personally, but I've actually trained a handful of people that had trained with him, and I had to fix some metabolisms. The recommendation that he was giving nutritionally and cardio-wise had set some of these bikini competitors back. And so I've actually never really been a fan of what he's presenting. Now, that's my only perspective is that, right? So I don't know him. We haven't hung out and talked. I know Jeremy really well. But when you were going through that process, were there anything that you didn't agree with that he was doing or that you did differently from what he told you? Or did you literally just do anything that he told you to do?
I pretty much just did what he said because it's a space that I didn't know anything about. And the cardio did start ramping up. We started at like 20 minutes and we ended up at 90 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Other people's experience might be different than my experience because, he was a text away from me. So I don't know how people hire him or how it normally works, but maybe they have, because I'm somebody in this industry, maybe he gave me a little bit extra special treatment. I don't know how he handles other people. Right. But with myself in particular, he kind of told me about, look, we're going to ask you to have a tremendous amount of output. There's not going to be a lot of input coming in. There's not going to be a lot of calories coming in. There's going to be a lot flying out the door. And when the show's over, you're going to have to be very, very careful and very cautious of what you eat. And you're going to have to really pay attention. And he was even suggesting like you might want to kind of go on like a keto diet, or you might want to try to reset your metabolism. He's like, enjoy yourself for a few days, but you might need to do something to really just try to balance out and make sure that your metabolism doesn't get too screwed up. But also at that time, I was fortunate enough to have a guy named, and this should be somebody you guys have on the podcast, the smartest person that I've ever met when it comes to nutritional information is a guy named Joel Green. It's like a food scientist of some sort. I don't even know what you would categorize him at. Joel was giving me a lot of advice when this bodybuilding show was over, and the advice was very unconventional. He was saying to have like these 3,000 calorie breakfasts and breakfasts. Yeah, there was more than one breakfast,
First breakfast, second breakfast.
Yeah. There was like 2 or 3 of them. And he was giving me a lot of weird recommendations. He was big on grilled cheese sandwiches. He's like, every 2 days, he's like,
I like this guy.
I know. He's like, crush a grilled cheese sandwich. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I crush a grilled cheese sandwich? I'm still hungry. Should I go back to kind of eating healthier food? He's like, no, just have another grilled cheese sandwich. Now, he had sophisticated,
this guy's
logical.
Brilliant.
I know. He had like sophisticated reasons for this. He was like, oh, it's the calcium, and this guy's knowledge goes beyond anything I've ever seen before. So I was just kind of trusting in him. Now, there was a balance of energy too. It wasn't just like I wasn't just, going balls to the wall, eating everything and anything that I wanted. But he was just saying, we got to kind of unring that bell, which is what you're talking about. We had to kind of fix your metabolism. It's like damaged. It like doesn't know what to do with calories, and it doesn't know what to do because you're not expending any anymore.
Do you know what your calories were at leading up to the show? Like how low did you end up getting?
I think my calories kind of throughout the prep were in the 3,000 range.
Oh, that's not bad.
And I didn't really get like, mine didn't really descend that badly, although we did start to cut out carbohydrates. But I wasn't eating that many carbohydrates anyway, because he kind of was like, you don't really eat them anyway. So he's like, I don't really know how much we should be giving you. So that was kind of a feeling out process for him, was like, I have no idea where you're at. I have no idea what you respond to and what you don't respond to. I think the conventional thought is that because I don't normally eat carbohydrates is that I maybe don't respond to them well, or maybe I don't handle them well, but that's really not the case at all. I actually handle them really well, and I've gotten in really good shape before with carbohydrates, 300, 400, 500 grams.
Yeah, a lot of the damage that you'll see will be from people who do repeated shows, and probably because you had leading up to that always focused on strength, probably in a calorie surplus or maintenance most of the time. Your metabolism was like fast, healthy.
Pretty healthy.
Yeah, you could probably fuck with it and it drop it, and it's not going to have a huge. Now, getting ready for a bodybuilding show can be extremely all-consuming. And I've talked to people who say that when they do that, because of the structure, it actually helps them in business because they're so structured and organized. And I've talked to other people who said, I can't even focus on work because that's all I focus on. And, you gave us a tour earlier of this place, and you've got quite the operation here.
Thank you.
How was it? I mean, massive. I mean, you have your shipping department's huge. You got a huge gym in here. You got this great podcast and media studio and all that. And, great place. A lot of employees, a lot of stuff going on. How were you able to run all these things while getting ready for your show? Or did it sharpen you, or was it something you had to take a step back from?
All the people here have been, they've handpicked is like not even the right word, because they kind of have come to us. All the people that are here belong here. All the people that work here really belong here, and they really have a great purpose for us. And
except for the guy we fired last week.
And except for the guy running the podcast over here. There's a couple people
that guy.
There's a couple people because of lawsuits that we can't fire, but we're working on it. No, but I have a great team of people, and something that you mentioned when we just had you guys on the podcast was kind of like this idea of like, if you have an idea, it might end up looking a little different than you originally thought. I have a similar line of thinking where if I give something to you, I have the thought process of, I hired you, I pay you. My thought process is, I handed this over to you. There's a really high potential, because I ask you to do this often, that you're going to do a way fucking better job than I can ever do. So I'm not handing it off to him being like, oh man, I wonder what's his interpretation of this post, or what's his interpretation of this email? Is he going to fuck it up? I actually kind of think that if I think that he's going to screw it up, he probably will. But I have a more positive outlook on it, because the men and women that work here have proven to me time and time again that they can step up to the plate and they can knock the ball out of the park. And so it gives me a lot of confidence. It doesn't really matter if I don't need to show up, or if I don't want to show up, I don't have to show up. These guys and girls are going to take care of it. My wife and I went on a vacation this year. We were gone for maybe about 2 weeks or so, and these guys handled it just fine. So I didn't have to step back from anything, though, because all the stuff that I've done when I was younger was way harder than any of this shit. So, I started the Slingshot, I started a magazine, I started my gym, all while raising, 2 kids and being married and juggling all the, just as you guys have done, just as anyone who's trying to juggle career, family, all these people have done it. My dad's done it. I mean, anyone who's trying to juggle these different things at once. I was kind of getting all these things done simultaneously while squatting over 1,000 pounds every week, while bench pressing over 800 pounds. So there was a lot of time was consumed to me spending tons and tons of time in the gym on myself. A lot of time was consumed on me building Supertraining Gym, which started in 2006. And a lot of time was consumed by me starting to develop some of these ideas. And a lot of time was consumed by my family. So I'm no stranger to, kind of what it takes to advance.
You started the Supertraining Gym in 2006?
Yeah.
Was that successful out the gates, or were you, because you made the comment earlier that you were poor for a long time. When did you start making money? How long was that when Slingshot came out, when things started to turn around?
Supertraining Gym has never been successful in terms of like a business. It's a weird business model. The gym is free.
It's free, yeah.
And
I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
So technically it's really successful though. Yeah. People show up and they're stoked, that's for sure.
Yeah, from a financial perspective, it's definitely maybe the opposite of that,
right, right.
But
how not to make money.
Right. But it's a little bit of an illusion in some way, because everything has kind of come from Supertraining Gym. And so,
sure. Good point.
You guys kind of asked on your way in, you were like, kind of everything kind of spawned off of the Slingshot stuff. And I said, yes, but that's actually not really the correct interpretation of it. It's like, no, actually everything spawned off the actual lifting. The lifting that's happened in here, because I started recording and started documenting stuff in 2004, before YouTube was ever even around. I had an account with Putfile, which doesn't exist anymore. And then as YouTube started to come around in about 2005, 2006 is when I started my YouTube channel and started I just knew.
I was just going to ask you, how the hell did you know? Because back then YouTube was cat videos and
No, I felt it.
Really?
I felt it. It was like a calling. Like I knew that what we did was weird, and I knew that other people wanted to see it. So I'm like, I need to share this in as many different spots as I possibly can. This is not normal. It's not normal for this guy to load up 8 plates on his back and squat it. Not normal for this girl to squat 6 plates. Like shit is strange. And I also know that other people would be obsessed by it, and other people would be amazed by it, and some people just want to learn more about it. Like, what is this? What are these men and women doing?
Well, now if you started the business without charging people to come into the gym, and was the catalyst to the success, how the fuck did you survive financially during that time when no one's paying you for anything you're starting about? Was this when you were doing gay porn?
This was you
mentioned that earlier.
This was the darker times.
Look that up.
Were we not supposed to talk about that?
That's the title of the first video, Darker Times.
I'd love to say I'm ashamed by it, but it really, kept the lights.
Awesome at it. Yeah.
I
was awesome at it.
Hey, when you're good, right?
Yeah, undeniable.
So at the time, my wife had a job and she was making some money, and then I also did some personal training and stuff like that. And so we just did what we could, you know. And in terms of the actual, the gym and the financing of the gym, like everything just happened in such a weird way. When I kind of look back at some of these things and think about how it all came to be, it doesn't seem real in some way. It's just strange shit happened, but a lot of circumstances shifted my way that allowed a lot of these opportunities. And one of the big ones was as I had super training inside of somebody else's facility in the very beginning. And I was it was in Woodland, California. It was called Body Construction Zone. And I was a trainer there as well. And I was also, working with my powerlifting team. And at the time I was coaching football as well. So at Pioneer High School, I was a defensive line coach and a strength and conditioning coach for the team. And so as this gym was like building up locally in the area, it's a new gym. I went and approached them and said, hey, it'd be great if you had some powerlifting. I work at the high school and I know I can get a lot of these kids over here. And so I kind of sold them on this idea of powerlifting and how it'd be good for their gym. And they said, hey, you can actually take the spot back here and you can just, you can fill it up with equipment. And then so I talked to the owners and stuff and I was like, well, I don't have any equipment, but I think it'd be great for you guys to invest in it so that your gym is different than all the other gyms around here. At the time, I wrote for EliteFTS.com under the name of Jackass. And I went to Elite and said, hey, like these guys are going to purchase this equipment and, see if I can get a discount and stuff. So we ended up getting a lot of equipment for a really good price. From that point, I was working with these guys for a few months, maybe like a year or so. And then I just didn't get a check. And I'm like, so I go to one person, they give me the runaround. I go to the next person, they give me the runaround. I go to the next person, I go to the owner, and each person got their own version of the story on why I'm not getting a check. And I was like, I have a family. I got a wife and kids, and we rely on these paychecks. Like I can't not get paid. I can't afford to do this for free. And so they were like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd love an opportunity to buy the equipment. And so these people, their business was going under. And I knew because their business was going under, I knew they didn't keep record of anything. So I was like, I'll buy everything in that back room. I'll take it off your hands. I tried to make it seem like a favor. I take everything off your hands for $3,000. And they're like, oh, I think it was way more than that. I was like, yeah, I think you're right. How about $5,000? They were like, okay. It's like $25,000 worth of equipment. So Supertraining Gym kind of started off of that. And then I just found some shithole place in Natomas, California, where we were next to a Hmong funeral home where they'd slaughter animals on a weekly basis.
Because they do that for
in the parking lot.
Yeah, and they do it for weddings, funerals, everything.
It was
my best friend is married a Hmong girl, and it was wild. And I'm the best man in the wedding.
Did you have to kill something?
Yeah. No, that's part of the best man's practice. Wow. How crazy is this? My best friend reaches out to me and tells me that, hey, getting married, all this stuff like that. I awesome, supportive of him. He's like, hey, I need you to come down on, Thursday, 2 days before the wedding.
Drink the blood of this goat.
And he's like, we gotta slaughter a cow, right? I'm just like, what do you mean we got a slaughter cow?
just got included in
we got a friend in your pocket or what? I ain't doing nothing like that. He's like,
I'm your guy.
He's like, that's the part of the tradition in their culture is for you as the best man to do this with me. So yeah, no, I had to slit the throat. And,
Did you slit the throat?
Yeah,
Did you like hold a hoof?
yeah.
or
Well,
something?
he actually did that part of it. I was there with him and moving and but it was
look into its eyes.
Yeah, I took a picture of it. I don't know if you guys remember. We were all together when this all happened. And there's a picture of me with my head down by the.
It was pretty crazy. I mean, they would give us food because they were there every weekend, and we had a lot of people lifting on the weekend, and yeah, they would be like, "Hey, you want some food?" At first, we were kind of like grossed out by it, but I was thinking like, well, it's pretty much the same way we get our food. We just don't see it that way.
Right.
You know, we don't see it the same way, and so, but it was crazy because they would haul in like these sides of beef, like in the back of like a truck. It was like a whole half of a cow that was like just chopped in half.
Yeah.
It was insane looking. And just to kind of see that, you're like, whoa, like, and this turns into food in a little bit, and they cook it up, and it seemed like gross, but I'm like, well, I don't know how, I mean, that's how we all are.
Yeah, no, it was
so
wild.
removed from that whole process.
It was wild to literally slaughter it at the slaughterhouse. And then an hour later we were unfolding it, all this bloody meat and stuff on the table, and then we're cooking it, and then 2 hours later we're eating it. That's to be a part of that. But I think it was
no wonder you guys are so strong over there. You got the sacrificial animals,
that's right,
metal playing, blood in the streets, and you hit records left and right.
So how long were you there then?
800 pounds.
I was probably there for about 2 years. And, again, to kind of reiterate, like you asked the question of like, how did you figure out how to survive? Because that's a big question for a lot of people. Like, how do I make a leap towards, you hear so many people saying, follow your passion. And then other people that have a 9-to-5 are like, dickhead, I can't follow my passion, you asshole. I don't have the opportunity because I can't leave my 9-to-5. And there's kind of this gap between the two people. One person's preaching this because they feel so good about what they're doing, and the other person's so mad because they can't figure out how to make that jump. But we just did whatever we could. Me and my wife, we just did whatever we could, and we tried to. I had a bunch of different jobs when I first moved. I'm from New York originally. When I first moved to this area, I was a bouncer. Like I did whatever I could. I just did, just make something so I can continue to do the shit that I love.
Where does that come from? Was that something self-taught? Was it innate in you as a child because of how you grew up? Like where does that, survival mentality come from? Because not a lot of people have that.
Always been fascinated by money.
Straight up.
I've always been just fascinated by money. So when I was a kid, I used to take like a wagon, and I'd load it up with like a bunch of shit from my garage and like sell it to people. I'd like knock on their door, and like I was like relentless with it. So people like once I came around a few times, they're like, man, this kid, like he just tried to sell me this mug like 2 weeks ago. And they're like, but like I appreciate the effort. So they'd be like, all right, I'll give you $2 for it, So
your dad's like, where's my favorite mug? Have you guys seen that?
Well, then my dad started actually helping me with it. He's like, maybe you should like, maybe we should get like nicer stuff, like get some things that people might actually like want.
Not your mom's broken frame.
Yeah. Not your dirty underwear or whatever, right? Well, those could be valuable. But I was doing a lot of that kind of stuff, and also just my dad. So my dad has a tax practice, and my dad's tax practice was, so my older brother, Chris, was born with like bad hips and bad knees. And so he went to a chiropractor a long time ago, and this kind of set forth our powerlifting forever. The guy that he went to said, if you're going to be out of pain, you're going to have to be strong. And so he taught us about powerlifting. We got excited and fired up about powerlifting. And my dad's like, well, this is great. Like all three of my boys, like my oldest brother, Mike, was already into lifting. We already had a little bit of stuff at the house, but my dad was like, we might as well go all in. So I don't know how my dad figured this out, but like we had a squat rack, we had Olympic plates, like we had like a full like gym, in our basement. And the other half of that was my dad's tax practice. And so like I would go down there to like work out, and I'd move around some weights and stuff. I didn't know what I was doing. And then I would like go in and I'd like talk to my dad, and my dad would be like, he'd show me all these checks and stuff, and he'd be like,
wow, that positive association.
Yeah,
lift weights,
like,
money.
Yeah. He's like, I made $50, off of this guy, and 120 off of this guy. And then a lot of the people he was mentioning too were like our like friends and family and stuff. I'm like, Dad, you make money off of like friends and family? Yeah. He goes, yeah, you got to. He's like,
I'm helping him out.
Awesome. Yeah, he's like, I make money off everybody, and it just kind of, it left my mind open to a lot of these things, because my dad, he worked for IBM. IBM had a headquarters in Poughkeepsie, New York, where I'm from originally. And my dad, worked there for like 19 years. And right around the time he was able to like collect a pension and do all these things, whoosh, boom, like boot his ass out the door because they can now hire two or three younger people. That was kind of that generation. They don't do stuff quite like that anymore. Some companies probably do, but it's less common now. But when I saw that and I saw my dad just spin it right into like, okay, no big deal. Like, I'll just do my own shit. And he started tax practice and started doing real estate. And then when I think back and I get questions from guys like you guys, I start to think back of, when I was a kid and I'm outside our house and I'm shooting baskets and stuff. Well, our mailbox said in giant letters that like the city or whatever complained about, in giant letters, it said Bell Financial Services. My dad's car said buy a house. My dad would buy magnets and put them on the side of the car. As soon as my dad started a business, he'd make a T-shirt. And then I started even thinking deeper into it. I'm like, where does some of this shit come from? Like it must come from my weird dad with all these things he was doing back then. But then I started thinking about it even more. And it actually came from my grandfather. My grandfather had a used car shop, and he would fix up cars and boats and stuff like that, and he'd sell them. But I remember seeing a lot of his stuff when I was a kid. He'd have Bell's Auto Mechanic, and it was like, he had shirts made up in like the 60s and 70s and stuff, and he had it was on their mailbox, and he like tried to like paint it on the side of his car and like just craziness. And I'm like, holy fuck, that's where this idea of like me taking these videos and putting them up on YouTube and having this recognition of, hey, like other people are going to want to see some of this stuff. Other people are going to want to see Supertraining Gym. I got to make t-shirts, and I got to, the first t-shirt I ever made, it had the ST logo on the front, and it had kind of a Superman type thing around the ST. And then on the arm, it had the address, just the same exact shit my grandfather did, 40 years before.
That's funny because while you're living it as a kid, you don't even know that
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's later on, right?
It took a long time for me to have that realization.
Imprinting it.
Yeah. Knowing all that, because you have kids, knowing all that, are you more aware of like the environment and shit you create for your kids that they're going to grow up with? Yeah,
and I, for a long time, my wife and I were kind of worried because we're like, our kids don't think that we work. Our kids, a lot of family members for a long time thought that I worked at Starbucks because that's where the Slingshot was created and invented, was at Starbucks. I used to go to Starbucks with my iPad and my iPhone. And I would just sit there and because I didn't have like an actual 9 to 5, like I mentioned earlier, I did some bouncing and stuff like that. And I power lifted. Those things consumed a lot of time. But why people were off at work, or why my wife was working or at the gym, or why my kid was in daycare or at school or whatever he was doing, I would go to Starbucks for a little bit, and work on kind of personal development type stuff and try to, I don't know, I guess just figure out, like I call it dicking around. And I think dicking around is important. Like people, they don't want to waste time, but I think that wasting time can be valuable, because I think that when you waste time, you start to stumble upon a lot of the things that you're kind of called to. And so my nieces and nephews and stuff are like, oh, Uncle Mark, he works at Starbucks. They thought I was punching in and punching
Uncle
out.
Mark, the time waster. Do you remember your first business failure?
Most of the stuff that I've done has been in concert and in collaboration with my wife. And so I love kind of diving all in. Like if you guys came to me with like a business idea, especially a few years ago, if you guys came to me like a few years ago, I'd be all hyped up and I'd be like, hey, let's do, and if it was just me, we'd probably be like off and running with it, But my wife will say, okay, well, let's kind of think about like, what does this look like in like 2 years? And what are these Mind Pump guys and you, like, what's this collaboration? What does it do for you? What does it do for them? And is everybody still going to have the same feel in like 2 years from now? So my wife is the one who will kind of pump the brakes on stuff. And so we started, Supertraining Gym, we started Power Magazine, we started the Slingshot. And all those things have been successful. They weren't successful overnight. They took a long time. And I've been powerlifting since I was 12 years old to kind of get a lot of these things in motion in the first place. So it took decades really to kind of lay the groundwork that gave me the ability to be able to do any of these things in the first place. But I haven't had, I tried pro wrestling, and I was successful enough to, wrestle all over the country, and I was successful enough to wrestle in Japan.
Now, how does that work? If you try pro wrestling, there's the only organization I'm aware of is like the WWE, or at the time when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was
They have a school for
yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. Like, how does
Right.
how does that process? What do you mean? How do you try pro wrestling?
Yeah. So, I was training at Gold's Gym in the mecca of bodybuilding. I was training at Gold's Gym in Venice and got approached by a guy named John Holliday, who was a wrestling coach and a promoter. And he was just like, "Hey, kid, you're pretty big, pretty jacked. Like, you ever think about doing pro wrestling?" And I was like, "All the time."
You're like, actually, my brothers and I do it every night.
Yeah, you fucking kidding me? Of course. I love pro wrestling. I was like, I just don't know anything about it. And he was like, I got a camp down in Malibu. He's like, come check it out. And so I tried out, and the guy killed me and made me do like 1,000 step ups and made me run and do push ups. And
That's the tryout. They just take you through a crazy workout.
Oh, it was horrible. Yeah, it was horrible. Yeah, but he made you take, they call them bumps. He made me take a lot of bumps and stuff like that too. Just seeing if you're like tough enough.
So what's a bump? Like they throw you?
Yeah, it's a fall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a
In the
fall.
ring, right? Where they throw you against the ropes and then give you
That's
a
the
shot.
that's
Well,
how you try out.
that's officially called a shoulder tackle, but a bump is just you landing on the mat. That's all.
Oh, so like, all right, we're gonna throw you around a little bit. I'm gonna take you through an insane workout, and then if you don't leave, maybe.
Yeah, and I was dead. I was really dead. But he was like, come here tomorrow at 8:00, and I foolishly showed up. But I did well enough in wrestling to make it through some of the amateur ranks, and to I got to do some stuff with WWE. I got to go to Louisville, Kentucky, where they have the training grounds for all the WWE athletes. And my brothers and I, part of the reason why the John Cena doll is there, my brothers and I got John Cena into wrestling. My oldest brother, Mike, was his wrestling coach and kind of mentor in the
Oh
beginning.
shit! I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Was he a phenom as a kid wrestler too, or was he?
He's always been John Cena. I mean,
Okay.
from day, like you just have that.
Yeah.
You just look. You got some
the
people.
gene.
Yeah, like we all know like one person, right? Like we all know one person that's just way off. Like they're way different than everybody else, and he's that guy. When I first met him, there's just so many stories to kind of sift through here. But when I worked at talking about trying to make ends meet, I worked for a company called Mass Movement. And what we did is we moved fitness equipment into gyms. And so we would extract.
I knew this company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember they moved. I owned a gym for a second, and I think we actually hired you guys to move some shit.
There you go. So we'd move equipment out of the gym and we'd put equipment back in. It was brutal. I mean, moving fitness equipment is brutal. They don't make it to be moved, which is kind of stupid because
wants to
like
live there. Yeah.
it's got to be moved, right? Like I think they're like, okay, we're gonna make this sick like leg press, and then they don't think about how's anybody gonna move this 900-pound thing or this calf raise or whatever. And so I was working at this place called Mass Movement, and we had a lot of crazy characters in there. The guy that ran the place, the owner of the place, he was like into bodybuilding and into lifting. And so he was always really kind to me and my brother. And we had a couple other people in there that were into fitness. And he'd always kind of say, hey, you guys don't need to like sweep up and like do some of this shit. He's like, just clock in when you want. And he's like, I'll punch you guys out, when I leave, which would be like 7 or 8 p.m. And we'd work like half a day. But he just wanted us to come in and do the grunt work. He's like, you guys just come in, move some heavy shit around. You'll get paid for a full day. So we're like, this is great. And so one of the managers there in the warehouse, she kept telling us about her friend. She's like, oh, my friend. She's like, you guys will gel with him so good. He's super jacked. And how many times have you guys heard somebody tell you about how great an athlete somebody is or how jacked they are, and you meet them and they're like 5'3" and they're like 150
Not
pounds.
impressed.
Yeah, you're like, what is this guy? And so she kept telling us about her friend, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And so she eventually showed me a picture, and I was like, who's that guy? And she's like, that's my buddy that I keep telling you about. She's like, that's John Cena. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, that guy is freaking huge. She goes, yeah, in this picture, he's like 18. And at the time, I mean, we were pretty young anyway. I was only like 21 or 22. And she's like, yeah, he's going to come out here and, he wants to do bodybuilding, and he's going to work here at Mass Movement. And I was like, cool. So then sure enough, a few weeks later, he comes out and I meet him. And just like I said, is the second that you, to be totally homosexual, the second that you lay eyes on him, the second that you lay eyes on him, you know that this guy's special. Like for whatever reason, there's just people in this world that are made out of something different than maybe the rest of us, even though we all want to be that person. This guy is truly that person. He's just charismatic and people are just drawn to him. Mm-hmm. People would go up to him and ask him tons of questions about his workouts and his diet. And he wasn't John Cena then, he was just a normal dude who was lifting. But his wrists are like, double the size of a normal person's wrists.
He's a big human.
He's massive. Yeah. It's ridiculous. And so people are drawn to him. And then when he started actually working there, he and I are like moving boxes around and like folding these towels and stuff. And I was like, dude, you got to do pro wrestling. He's like, nah, I want to do bodybuilding. And he was getting ready for a bodybuilding show. I was like, what are you doing for the bodybuilding show? He's like, I'm just not eating. He's like, and I'm like, really?
Old school strategy.
Yeah. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, I train really hard. I train twice a day and I'm just not eating. And I'm like, you don't eat at all? He's like, I have like 2 protein shakes a day. And I forget what the other thing was that he had, maybe like a chicken breast and some vegetables or something. And I was like, so how long are you doing this for? And I was expecting him to say like, 2 or 3 days. He's like, for about 2 months. And I was like, holy shit. Like no one can actually do that. Right. But I saw him day in and day out with his 2 protein shakes and his chicken breast, his 2 protein shakes and his chicken breast. And I'm like, this guy's a fucking lunatic. Like anyone that can handle that can kind of handle anything. And so I kept talking to him about wrestling. My other brother, Chris, was talking to him about wrestling. And eventually he came down to Ultimate Pro Wrestling, UPW, and ended up wrestling for about 5 months. And then he got picked up by WWE. And it took him a long time to kind of progress through the minor leagues. Like there's a huge process that goes on. And to John's credit, he didn't get to jump or bypass anything because he had a bodybuilding look. He had to really, truly work for it. So when I say that we got him into the wrestling business, he did all the hard work.
Right. So when you say that, you're talking about like skill and presentation and all that.
Yeah, but he had that. He just had that.
Really?
I mean, you can even like if you look up, there's a documentary that was done on us being pro wrestlers that was done for the Discovery Channel some 20 years ago. He cuts a promo on me that's just it's just out of this world. He was known as a prototype, and he'd come on and he kind of had this robotic thing to him, but he had it down. Like he practiced. You don't talk about like, people are always wondering how to get good at something. Well, you fucking practice it, right? So here I am, I'm super nervous, and like I go to cut a promo on him and mine's awful. And then he gets the mic and boom, he just smashes me.
Wow.
He's like, Smelly, I look into your genetic lunchbox and I see a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the crust cut off. And he goes into this whole thing, and it's like
money.
Because that was my wrestling name. Is that my name was Smelly because my oldest brother called me Smelly. Yeah. And I was picked on. Like we just kind of in wrestling, that's what they do. They kind of just utilize whatever you got.
Sure.
And it just kind of
were you a heel or were you a good guy?
I was a good guy. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he and I both kind of switched things up, here and there. They just kind of depending on what we were doing. Like, when you don't have a TV script to follow, you can kind of play, you play whatever. So we could switch things up a lot, but he and I did many battles. We've wrestled a couple times for like 30 minutes straight, 40 minutes straight.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, all the stuff that you learned in pro wrestling, has any of that helped you with like this new media world of podcasting and video and all that stuff?
100%. And that's why I brought it up, because you asked about like failed things. So, my whole life I wanted to be a professional football player. Like that's what I loved when I was a kid, and I was really drawn to that, and I was attached to that. And I would train every summer. I'd run, and I would, do all these different things. And, I just thought like, hey, if I just put in the work, like it'll just happen. And it was actually a good thing, in a lot of ways that these things didn't happen. And then kind of same thing with pro wrestling. As I started messing around with pro wrestling and started doing it, and I started realizing I'm not as talented as these other people. Like, I don't know, specifically like what the differences are. I know I'm trying really hard, and yeah, potentially I could try harder. And then
how old were you when you started to realize that, where you're like, oh crap, this is different?
Yeah. 25 or so, 24, 25. And, my dad has a saying that says, part of knowing who you are is knowing who you're not. And that has been something that I've always kind of leaned on in my life. And I kind of looked around when I was at Ohio Valley Wrestling, and I was like, okay, I'm not like that guy over there. I'm not like that guy over there. I don't have the attributes of this. Like, I'm not 7 feet tall. I'm not, and I was in pretty good shape and stuff, but I wasn't in the shape that I'm in now. And I was just like kind of looking around the room and like, okay, I know I don't have that. I know I don't have this. And Shelton Benjamin, who's like a 4-time national champion collegiate wrestler. I mean, these men and women, like, athletically are just off the charts. Mm-hmm. They
normally almost always have like a crazy background, right? Most of them have like a very competitive wrestling background already.
Like Brock Lesnar was there, Randy Orton, Mark Henry. I mean, Mark Henry is the world's strongest man competitor, and Brock Lesnar is a multiple-time national champion.
Kurt Angle's, guys like that.
Freak. I mean, these are freak athletes. These are not, they just think the pro wrestling, just because it's scripted, they just think that like maybe they're not talented people. But these are very, very talented people that work on their skill every single day. And so Shelton Benjamin pops up on the top rope, and I'm sure you guys have kind of seen The Undertaker like walk the top rope, and then he comes down and he like punches the guy or whatever. Shelton Benjamin did the same thing, but he ran around the entire ring on the ropes.
Wow.
And then proceeded to stop, and then he did what's called a moonsault, which is basically just a backflip, and landed on his feet. And like things like that just kind of made me go, like, whoa. There's definitely not like there's no room for me in this. Yeah. And I think that that's healthy, though. I think that that's a good thing, and I think that's as a parent, I think that's the hope for my kids, is that I don't want them to feel like they're excluded from anything. I don't want them to feel bad about anything, but at the same time, it's great to recognize who you're not, because then you can figure out who you are very quickly.
You mean you don't want to bullshit him and give him a 7th place trophy?
Right.
Right. Like that.
Yeah.
So, I read Bret Hart's book. It was a great, great book. And one of the things that I was really fascinated in was how crazy the steroid, the opiate, all that use was. But before we got on air, you and I were kind of talking a little bit about kratom, and I was sharing with you that I wish I was familiar with kratom when I went through my opiate addiction, because I think that would have helped me tremendously. Now, when you were going through all this, did you battle with any of this? Did you start dipping into anabolics at this time? Are you partaking in opiates and things? Like what happened with you?
I never got into like painkillers. Mm-hmm. I never got into what I guess I'd consider like recreational drugs. I actually, before the age of like 25, I think I've only been drunk at that point like one time in my life. And I was only like kind of drunk because my friends gave me some drinks on my bachelor party. And that was about it. So I wasn't into any of that stuff. Steroids, however, they were always present. They were always kind of there. I always kind of knew that I would end up gravitating towards them at one point or another. I remember, reading like Muscle Media 2000 and reading some of these magazines, and I really wanted to learn more. I was really fascinated by them. I'm like, man, these things, they make you like bigger. They help you get bigger and stronger, and then on every other page in this magazine are things that are supposed to try to help you get bigger and stronger, but they don't actually really work, according to a lot of the strongman athletes, and according to the people that I looked up to, like a Bill Kazmaier, and because back then people were a little bit more open too. In fact, this is like before my era, but you can go back and look at some like old Muscle and Fitness back when it was called like Muscle and Power, and it would say the person's workout, and it would say they did 5 sets of 5 squats. They did 3 sets of 10 leg extensions, 3 sets of 10 leg curls. They did some ab work. And when they finished up their workout, they had some milk and some steak and a potato. And then it will say Dianabol, 25 milligrams. And then it will kind of go on to the next thing. And I was always like, wait, what's that?
That is so true.
What are some of these things?
I have some old magazines that would say that. And then
I didn't know that.
And then it went the opposite, where they pretended like none of that happened with the Weider, Muscle and Fitness and all stuff. Then you had like Muscle Media 2000, Bill Phillips, Dan Duquesne, and then they were bringing it back to the whole honesty thing. But there was a lot of pushback back then too.
And my uncle was big into pro wrestling as well, and so he played football, and I didn't know at the time, but he was into anabolics and stuff like that too. He's the one who had those magazines, and that's kind of where I first saw a lot of this stuff, because I wouldn't have had access to those older magazines otherwise. But yeah, I was fascinated by it. I was like, man, these things seem like they're great. Like, why the hell are they like even illegal? And then I kind of learned more. I'm like, oh, well, you got to inject them. That's really weird. You like injecting this oil in your body, and you need a syringe, and like, okay, now it's starting to sound like drugs rather than like this cool supplement that I kind of thought that it was. And then it was probably around the time of, I was about 25 or 26. I was training at Westside Barbell. My wife and I, we lived in Columbus, Ohio. I was commuting and going to Ohio Valley Wrestling to be a pro wrestler. And it was kind of around that time where I was just like, I just need to be bigger. You know, like I just, as I was mentioning, I looked around the room and I'm like, there's no spot for me in here, you know? And so that was around the time that I got on stuff, which was really weird, because I went from being natural and being at Westside to where everybody already knew I was already established as like the new guy, and I was already established as being the only guy in the gym who didn't take anything. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I wanted to take stuff. So I'm like, who do I even ask? Like, where do I even start? And then who in here is going to think I'm a cop? Because no one actually knows me. And that's what started to kind of fly around the gym. They're like, he's starting to ask for drugs, man. I think he's a fucking cop. So no one would sell me. No one would sell me anything. So then I started going to like message forums and stuff like that. And I just ended up ordering shit off the internet.
That's the first time you got some was off the internet?
Yeah.
Holy shit. And back then that was very different.
Yeah.
What did you start with?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you remember what your first cycle was?
Yeah. I had testosterone, Deca, and Dianabol, and I got fucking massive.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I gained like 40 pounds.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand that that I was going to have that kind of response on me. A lot of the pro wrestlers, they were taking stuff too, and I was kind of asking them for some advice, but they weren't very knowledgeable. And so I was really getting a lot of the information off these message boards. And they were saying, yeah, you take, somewhere to 300 to 500 milligrams of both, and then you take X amount of this. And by the way, this might get shut down on YouTube, because they've shut down other things that I've talked about when I've gone this deep down the rabbit hole.
Really?
Yeah, you can't promote. You can't like promote, but I'm not promoting it, and not.
We're sharing.
No, this is sharing a story.
Yeah.
We're counting on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys air these on YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh no. This is
before.
Yeah. This is. I don't. Well, we did a whole anabolic steroid thing with Stan Efferding, and then we did one.
I had John Romano on the show.
I think it might depend on how you talk about it.
Of course.
Yeah, we're really careful about not promoting it as much as sharing our personal, which is why I like to ask,
Just
because
honesty, really. Yeah.
I did a lot of things the wrong way, like you. It was my early 20s when I did, and I took the advice of just some random bodybuilder guy and probably took way more than I needed to.
Right.
Yeah, and did not put as much effort into my post-cycle therapy and what I should be doing with that. And it forever changed me hormonally. Like I never fully recovered. Well,
that's something I try to share with people very openly. Like, if you're going to make that decision, then, it's almost like going into business. Like, once you kind of start a business, what's your exit strategy going to look like? Or like, what does it look like in a few years from now? And same thing with, getting on anabolic steroids. It might be a life decision. You might have to be on them the rest of your life. Otherwise, you might not be. I know for myself where I was before I ever took them, and how strong I was before I ever took them, and the shape that I was able to get in before I ever took them. And it would be hard to get back to that spot without them for a period of time. And when I say period of time, probably about a year, because like everything, maybe even longer, everything would have to kind of like normalize. And who knows like how long that would take. It might take a really long time. And so you end up being worse off than you were than before you ever took them.
I think it's also too important, because you said how much weight and muscle and mass you gained, but you had been powerlifting and training since you were 12. And there's genetics to how people respond to these things as well. I had guys that would work for me, trainers or sales guys when I would manage gyms, who would get on gear and their training wasn't good, their diet wasn't good, and they didn't have the best genetics. And these guys would gain like 8 pounds and they'd be on a shit ton of gear. And then I knew guys that would barely touch anabolics and their muscles would just explode. So there's that also, because I think sometimes people listen like, oh, cool, I'm going to take all this gear and I'm going to gain 40 pounds like Mark did. No, most people don't. Most people just get bloated.
And yeah, my friends at wrestling, they were like, holy shit. I was like, yeah, I actually work out.
Now, you fell in love the first time you took them. Was that just a love affair of cycling on and off, or were you on them and that was it?
Just, I love lifting, so anything that's going to help me with lifting, I'm going to be for, just like my lifting belt. Like it helps me lift more. If I take something that helps me lift more, then I'm going to want to utilize it. And so we call it going to the dark side. When I went to the dark side, I kind of made the decision, like, I'll probably be dark side for life, because I knew some of the things that I wanted to get out of it. I think maybe secretly, I think I knew that I was really doing it for my love and passion of just training. And it wasn't really for wrestling, but I used kind of wrestling as the excuse, much like you use football as an excuse for like lifting, but you're probably lifting just to get you in better shape so you can meet girls or something like that. Like there's probably other reasons other than just that. And so, yeah, I mean, how could you, and then also, how do you not get addicted to something? That people talk about addictions. How do you not get addicted to something that makes you better at what you love to do? What if you took a drug and it made you write better music? Right. And that does happen, right? People take mushrooms and they marijuana and like all kinds of things, and then they're like, "Holy shit, man! I write a lot better when I do that." And so there they are.
Well, now that you're a father, and at some point your kids are going to listen to your podcast and watch if they don't already. If one of your kids comes up to you and says, "Hey, Dad, listen, I'm really into training like you.
Right.
This is what I really want to do. I want to get on some gear so I can just build bigger muscles and be real strong." Have you thought about what that conversation would be like if that happened?
I haven't really thought about that in particular, but I have had a lot of people ask me over the years, "Hey, man, I really been thinking about it," and then I'll try to explain to them, what you mentioned is like, this could be like a lifetime thing. And do you want to have children? There's that, like, cause who knows, like it might mess you up, to where you can't or something. And then it's like, my brother asked me that question in Bigger, Stronger, Faster. And I was like, well, if I can't have another kid, then I guess I made a mistake. Cause at the time I already had one, I think. And, if it messed me up forever like that, then I guess I have to live with those consequences. But I try to make people aware that this could be a potential real consequence. And what steroids do, like, I'm never going to undersell it. I don't know what the fuck they do. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, some people say, there's no real proof that tumors grow bigger, because you're on steroids or growth hormone or some of these things. But it's like, I don't really know. So I'm not going to really say that. It's a drug and it's very dangerous. And it's important that people be cautious with it.
Well, they've been around long enough. I think we know a lot of what they do and they don't do, which brings me to another topic. I've been getting a lot of questions now for the last maybe couple of years on SARMs. People wanting to take these, SARMs that they're buying online. And my argument to them is always like, look, if you're going to go that route, why not go the antibiotic? I don't promote that you go break the law and take steroids, but if you're going to already go that route and take something that's attaching to your androgen receptor, why not take the thing that at least has been around for 50 years and we know? Like, do you have an opinion on SARMs? Or is that becoming a big thing in the sports world, or are people like it's a waste of time?
I think it's pretty clear that they work. And I think it's pretty clear that people are utilizing them. What's not clear is maybe how they work and maybe all the different things that they do. At least with steroids, they've been used for a long time. Like you said, they got a little bit of a track record, so to speak. And they've been used for a while, not just amongst bodybuilders, not just amongst athletes, but clinically as well, just to boost someone's testosterone. And you naturally have, testosterone in your body. Some of these things that the SARMs are doing, I'm not fully aware of the mechanics of how these things work. But I would say that they're probably not things that are naturally floating around in your system.
Yeah, you don't make SARMs.
Which doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, because you don't make broccoli either, So it's like, I can't really say whether I think they're like good or bad, but I do think that people are seeing, like, from my understanding and what I've heard from a lot of people, is they're gaining weight, they're gaining strength, they're seeing, and I would imagine a lot of our athletes are on them. A lot of CrossFitters are probably using them. There's one in particular that's supposed to be exercise in a bottle, literally. It's supposed to lower your LDL cholesterol. It's supposed to trick your body into thinking that you just did a half an hour of cardiovascular training.
Boy,
which I don't know. I don't know how it works, and I'm not saying that it does work. These are just things that I've heard, but that is fucking crazy. And that's what Louis Simmons predicted in Bigger, Stronger, Faster, my brother's film. He said, what happens when they make something that's better than steroids? He's like, then what do we do?
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think myostatin inhibitors might, but I don't know about the SARM thing.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting topic because I think people are always going to try and push the limit and to see and experiment and see what they can do.
And unlike steroids, there's people that, I guess steroids are weird because the way that people have to sell them is so strange. But SARMs, I guess, is a little bit similar. But now we have the internet, and people are figuring out ways of purchasing SARMs on the internet via they're buying gift cards and purchasing whatever weird way they can.
Oh, interesting.
The weird thing about SARMs, and the thing that I would really be cautious of, is that there's a lot of monetary gain for these companies that are making them. So that would be, these are going to be the people that are going to share the information with you. And so I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't know how truthful they'll be,
right.
And I don't know
it's pretty biased when they want you to buy it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like
they're selling you stuff for $90 or something, but the supplement industry is the exact same way. So it's hard to say, but.
So is the CrossFit industry, right? They have their own medical journal that they provide all their information, and it supports
safer than gardening.
Yeah.
They actually told us that. Yeah. That's a true story.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, a little off air, we talked about your podcast journey. And one, I'd like to hear what made you even think about getting into the podcast space. I know that you've had more than one name for the podcast. So maybe share why you got into it and then what that journey's been like for you.
Yeah. So initially it was called Mark Bell's Powercast, and it was something that was started probably about 5 years ago or so, maybe 6 years ago. I don't even remember now. It's been a long time. We've done a lot of episodes, and I don't even have a record of how many of those we've done. But at some point, I had to shift gears. Sometimes when you're in business, and sometimes when you do things with other people, sometimes you grow apart. And so. In this particular case, me and the guy that kind of came up with the idea of having a podcast, his name's Jim McDonald, and he actually has gone off and done his own podcast as well. We just weren't seeing eye to eye, and even off the bat, he and I are just different. I see that you guys are all very different, but you guys are all very much the same too. You have a lot of similar goals, and he and I had kind of similar things that we liked, like powerlifting and like podcasting, but we had too many differences when it kind of came down to the overall picture of what we were trying to do. And, he kind of liked the advertising model, and he liked and he would research stuff, and he'd come to me and say, hey, this is how much you can make off of doing A, B, and C. And I was kind of a little frustrated with it. And I was like, well, you're just really making money off of me, because that's why I'm not trying to be a hot shot or anything, but that's why people are tuning in. And I don't like the way this sounds. And so then eventually I kind of gave into it, which was a bad idea on my part to kind of give in on some of that stuff. And I actually told him and our other co-host at the time, I said, look, you guys want advertising, go for it. Just go get it yourself, go grab the advertisers yourself. And I said, I'll even give you my contacts. I got contacts with every major company that you can possibly think of that would sponsor this podcast. Turned it all over to them. They did absolutely zero with it.
Oh, wow.
So zero internal drive from either one of them. And to me, that's the most disgusting thing in the world. I cannot handle that. I can't handle even being around that. It's like a virus to me. And I don't like that. I don't agree with that way of thinking and stuff like that too. And then the other part of it was, the other guy on the show was an actual employee of mine too. So that was causing some friction there as well. And so it was getting to be a stressful situation rather than just fun. Right. You guys are saying, we all get together and we all just sit down, and I'm sure occasionally things get heated, but for the most part, it's the job itself. If it wasn't fun, you guys would sit down and have a major conversation about, hey, dude, this ain't fucking fun anymore. So that's where we ended up going is it ended up just not being fun anymore. And, as things kind of shifted and as things started to change, we ended up we ended up utilizing Smokey, who you guys met on the way in, and he was handling our advertising. And we were starting to do really well. We were starting to do 6 figures with our advertising, and we were barely just getting started. And, it got to a point where we started taking on some ads that I was just like, these are not even like really in the fitness space anymore. And they're not really like, there was one for like a watch and one for this and that. I'm like, at the time I wear a Fitbit now, but like at the time I didn't wear a watch. And I'm like, I don't even wear now I'm doing these reads. I'm like, this is like, I don't care. I don't give a fuck about money. I have always been fascinated by money. And I've always liked making money, but I don't actually like physically care about it that much. It is important to have financial freedom is a wonderful place to be. And I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, but it wasn't where my focus was. My focus and my reason for doing the podcast was not a financial one. My purpose and reason for starting my podcast, my YouTube channel a long time ago was not for financial reasons. Like at that time, the YouTube didn't even give you money for.
Yeah, you didn't even know you could make money off of it.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, right. I didn't know. It didn't know any of that. Like that's not the real reason why I started anything. And the same thing with the Slingshot was obviously like a thing that I could monetize. It was very clear that once I had an invention, now I could sell something. But that's not the main reason why that was invented either. So as I kind of thought about it more, I'm like, man, this is just not working out. And he and I had a conversation, and his thoughts were so opposite of mine. I kind of went home and I talked to my wife about it. I was really upset. I was fucking crying because this is somebody that has been with me for a long time. So this is a shitty decision. Like, I don't want to have to.
Yeah, that was probably a hard conversation.
Yeah, I don't want to have to talk to this guy and tell him like that we're done. But at the same time, I'm like, it just doesn't feel right anymore. And as I started saying it out loud, as you were mentioning on the podcast earlier, as I started saying it out loud, I started realizing how much more sense it actually makes. Rather than like, sometimes you say something out loud and it sounds really dumb and you're like, whoops, that sounds really retarded. But in this case, it just made more and more sense. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize how unfair this is to him too. To keep this going is unfair to him because he's making money and he's kind of he's like almost delusional because he's getting a salary from this, which is cool. He's making some dough. But he's almost blinded by the fact that, like, yeah, you are getting money, but this is costing you a lot of stress. Mm-hmm. He even shared with me that he needed to get help for it and go to the therapist and stuff. And I'm like, so when I went to him and I explained it to him, he was pretty heated. He's pretty mad. And I said, I just don't think this is fair even for you. And when I said that, I think it kind of sunk in with him. And I think he was kind of like,
you didn't do the it's me, it's not you, it's me.
Yeah. So, I do appreciate everything that he did for Supertraining Gym because he did a lot of the videos in the beginning. He did a lot of the a lot of the stuff that people really liked from supertraining.tv that we did years and years and years ago. We're one of the first people in the fitness industry to even do like voiceovers. It's like this weird stuff to say that you did a million years ago. It sounds really weird to say it now because it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but these are things that we did, and no one to this day is even close to having put out as many informative videos than what I have done. I've continued to do it now that he's not here anymore, but I really do appreciate him kind of getting a lot of that started.
What did you learn from that relationship? I'm assuming that it probably was a little bit of bad blood, went different directions, maybe don't talk very much. What did you learn from that?
Just, it's just so cliche to say it, but communication is really crucial. And I guess probably the main thing that I learned from that, and this is a really weird thing, and this is new to me. I've never really experienced this before, but I'm in a position now to where if I don't communicate with somebody, and maybe this is not even correct. Maybe this is just my feeling. My feeling is that if I'm not in communication with somebody, they're going to start to build animosity towards me. And a lot of that is surrounded by probably social media and probably like maybe the things I post. Like, so think about it, if we're working together and you're busting your ass every day and we're hanging out all the time and we're communicating a lot, and then boom, I got like 75 other things to do and we don't talk for a bit. I come back around and I keep kind of doing that over and over again. You're seeing a different post. You're seeing my beach house. You're seeing my new car. You're seeing this. You're seeing that, and you're still working really hard. But maybe you don't feel that things are fair on your end. You're not communicating that back to me. you and I are not sitting down and talking about like what really makes sense for you, what really makes sense for me. And we just kind of keep going. It keeps going in the circle, and your animosity is starting to kind of, you're about to blow your top. You're about to blow up. And that's when I kind of was recognizing like, man, even when I have had conversations, because not like we never talked about it at all, even when I've had conversations with him, he's been very, very stressed about it. He'd do kind of big ass sigh and stuff like that. And I was like, man, like, and I don't, it's rare for me to get like really worked up about anything. And so for me, I was even starting to feel stressed out about it. I'm like, man, if I'm getting stressed out, I know that he, handles situations differently than I do. So I'm like, he must be really freaking stressed out about it. So we got to probably discontinue this.
Did you find that you were building resentment because you weren't able to fully express how you felt the whole time? Because I've had friendships where I've had to end them. And the reason why I've ended a lot of these friendships was, and I look back, it's like, I never told them how I felt through this whole time. It just built up until I finally said, I don't want to hang out with you or whatever.
I think that might have been more on his end, but I'm not sure why, but like, it's just one of those deals where on that person's end, they feel slighted. And on my end, I feel the opposite way. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, hey, I'm presenting you a lot of opportunity. And he feels like, I'm not getting enough out of this. So it's like, whoa, like how the hell did that happen?
There, yeah.
Did you know you were going to do another podcast when you had told him you were done, or were you done? Like, I'm not doing podcasts anymore.
There was like a pause for a little bit. Yeah, there was a little bit of a pause. And then we just kind of like, picked up the pieces, and it took a minute, to kind of figure out, because I went from, having two co-hosts to, to having one, to having none, and then to kind of restart. And then I was like, well, now I guess all along I kind of knew that I could just be on the show myself, because there's just so much shit to talk about, as we've talked about on the last podcast. I mean, we could sit here and talk about training forever. So I always like to have ownership of stuff. I'm not necessarily a control freak, but I also don't think that I'm going to really, I can work well with other people, but I can't work well for you. And I know that about myself because I don't care about what you want me to do. I care about what I want to do. And that's just kind of, I've always been that way. And I mentioned that on the podcast we just did, like in terms of like education, like I've always been, the shit that I don't care about, I don't care about it. And it's kind of taken me a long time to, kind of come to this realization that like, I hardly have any emotion towards a lot of things that I need to. There's certain things I need to care about a little bit more. Like if my wife is feeling a certain way, like I need to pause, and I can't be like, well, I don't give a fuck about that. Because I honestly, for many, many years of my life, didn't really care that much about a lot of stuff. I'm the kind of person that my car could be on fire. Well, it kind of was on fire. My dad and my son borrowed my car, and they went out to Reno. They were going to a Donald Trump rally. I know that'd be really popular. They were going to a Donald Trump rally, and I told them they could take my car because my car was newer. It was an Escalade. It was like a 2016 or 17 or something like that. And on their trip, it freaking blew up. The engine just stopped working, and they're stuck on the side of the road. My wife is like freaking out. She's like, it's, at that time, I think it was like 9:00 at night, and 9:00 turned into 11:00 and so on. They're in the middle of nowhere in Nevada. And, fortunately for me, my wife and I use a car service, and we got a friend that was able to, get somebody out there in the middle of nowhere and pick them up and bring them to a hotel and all this stuff. But like the whole time, my wife, while she's kind of upset and panicking, and she's really worried because my son and my dad are stuck on the side of the freeway. I'm just like, well, I'll call my friend, and he'll probably get a car out there, and they'll probably pick them up. And she's like, well, what about the Escalade? I'm like, who cares? I'm like, just leave it there. She's like, we can't just leave it there. I was like, well, technically we could.
We have to.
Yeah. And I was like, technically we could, or we can just get it towed somewhere, and then maybe they'll fix it, or maybe we'll sell it or whatever. And so
how did the fans react when you canceled the old podcast and then started the new one? Did you get a lot of change, or were people like, it's fucking
there's a lot of like weird interpretations of me. People
like which ones?
Well, people people that have been around me understand that I love to train. I love to lift weights, you know, and that's my passion is that. And my passion is also helping people, to, you know, if I can get, you know, people to feel 1/5 of what I'm feeling, then I think I'm doing pretty good. Because I just get so excited by training. It's done so much for me over the years. And so that's one of the goals, and that's one of the missions. But the fans, I mean, they were confused, you know, and I think that when they see the transitions that the gym has gone through and they see the changes that have happened, you know, people might say, well, oh man, you've really changed. And it's like, well, I hope so. That's my goal. Like I want to change. I want to be better than I was yesterday. And I want to leave the person that I was like in the dust, because I want to continue to progress and I want to continue to grow. And there'll still be certain values that I hold dear to my heart and that I hold on to. But there's going to be a lot of stuff that I leave in the past, and there'll be probably a lot of people I'll leave in the past. And I don't really have control over that. And I've kind of had this philosophy of either you're in or you're in the way. You know, if somebody's with me, then they're with me, then that's cool. But if you're not with me, then you're against me. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the philosophy that we've had here. And it used to be on the gym walls. Probably I need to get it up on this gym wall, but it used to be on our gym wall. And that's kind of our main motto. Like you're either with what we're doing or you're not.
Do you remember coming on our show years ago?
A long time ago. I vaguely remember it because I think that we just did it via Skype, right?
Yeah, no, we did. I've given you shit without you being on the podcast for a long time. We've probably done, I don't know, 300 or so interviews, and people always ask me my least favorite, and I say it's Mark Bell's interview. And they go, "Why? He's such a great guy." Because everybody likes you. I mean, when you get a chance to hang out and meet you in person, as I feel we have too.
Everybody said really good things.
Everyone's always said great things. And fuck that guy. I don't like that guy. and they're always going like, "Why?" And I said, "Well, the motherfucker took our podcast inside of his car."
You don't remember that? You were on your cell phone.
I said I could hear his dinging of his fucking door while we were asking questions from him. So fuck him. No, I don't like
awesome.
him. Yeah. So. For the longest time, I talked shit about you until, no, that's as much as I would say. I just, I speak what.
Hey, that's proof. That's some proof right there, because I feel like I invented those videos from the car. Go back and watch some of the old YouTube videos.
Now,
I'm doing it right from my car.
Now, to be fair,
that car's a good studio.
That was early on when we were just getting started, and so you probably
we had nothing but piss and vinegar.
Yeah, you were like doing this. You're like, oh, I'll get on this. These guys' podcast.
Yeah.
Whatever. So it was. But I remember.
It's funny though.
I remember we were interviewing you, and I could hear you like turn on the car and like. Open the door, you hear the ding,
awesome.
ding, ding, ding. Hold on a second, guys, and you're doing something else. I'm like, this motherfucker.
The biggest part of that was just, try finding somewhere quiet in your house when you got 2 kids, and so that was the biggest obstacle a couple of years back. I mean, my kids are now, my son is going to be 15 at the end of this month. And,
oh, wow.
And my daughter is 11. So, yeah, I mean, they're growing up, but when they were young, I just remember like everything was just chaos all the time. So anytime I took a phone call, I'm like, I need to get the fuck out of here. I didn't have everyone else to go. The gym was going to be cranking loud too,
Now these guys talk a lot on our show because they both have kids and share.
I take care of my kids.
What a reflection it is having children on yourself and your insecurities and your weaknesses. What have your kids taught you about yourself?
First I want to kind of address what you mentioned earlier, because I did say that, I've been asked a question about steroids a lot, and you were specifically asking more so
about your kids,
about my kids, if they ever asked me about. So my kids, I don't know what they know, but they
more than you think usually.
Yeah, way more than you think. So my son is actually like, he was looking for like his cowboy hat, and he stumbled upon some stuff that's in my closet. I got needles and shit like that. I got testosterone in there. I do get stuff prescribed by a doctor, but like when that question does pop up from my kids, and I didn't have a chance to communicate with Jake about steroids at that moment, but it's probably, we probably do need to get in conversation about it soon. I didn't want to like start the conversation too young, just because I just thought that maybe it's not a good place to start, but I'm sure that he probably already has some questions about it. So now-ish would be a good time to kind of get on that. and I wouldn't bullshit them though. I wouldn't say like, oh, I get it prescribed by it. Like I would say that. I would say that, hey, look, what I'm doing is legal. Like I have like documents that I get this from a doctor. I'm not like, buying this on some alleyway. But what I will tell them is I'll say, these are this is something I utilized in my career. I thought I needed it to lift the weights that I lifted. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. When it comes down to that. But
what about back to my question about looking at your kids and seeing, their insecurities and things like that, and it being like a big reflection for yourself? Do you see things in them that makes you go like, oh fuck, that was me, or I got that?
I think that I've experienced a lot because I've moved around a lot. I've been around a lot of people. The experiences that I've had in professional wrestling and rubbing elbows with really high end or high level, I should say, lifters and business people. And, after kind of like seeing all these things over the years and taking in a lot, and I've always actually been, surprisingly enough, I've actually been very quiet for a long time. And so I was very shy and very reserved. And, when I look at my kids and I kind of see how they respond to things, it was when they were really, really young and they started kind of playing sports and just getting around other kids that I started to recognize, like, it just made me kind of think about, okay, when I was a kid, somebody might look at their son and be like, man, I don't understand. Like this kid, he gets up to bat and he's like barely in the batter's box. And he barely has his bat up and like he looks like he's terrified. Well, fuck, man, maybe he is. The kid who's pitching like can't even get the ball over the plate. He's like one pitch will be 50 miles an hour and the next pitch will be 10 and the next pitch will be thrown over the backstop. And it's like, man, maybe your kid is scared. But I think it's hard as an adult to remember back to how you actually felt. And it's easy for us to think about, hey, man, you got to get in the gym and you got to bust your ass. You got to make things harder on yourself so that everything else in life's easier. And, it's easy to kind of say some of these things now. But as a kid, you were probably like terrified of these things. You were probably scared of these things. You probably were a lot more reserved. My son, for the longest time, would do his homework and he wouldn't hand it in. And my wife is like, I don't understand why he won't hand his homework. I'm like, he's just too shy.
Is it like fear of failure, you think?
It's like he's too shy. And she's like, he's too shy to hand in his homework. I'm like, probably that. Probably also like he probably didn't do all of it. You know what I mean? Like he probably did like a certain percentage of it, but then he like didn't realize he didn't do the answers on the back or something, probably something along those lines. But I was like that too. There was no possible. And then my wife would be like, you got to talk to your teacher. You got to tell your teacher that you've done some of this work and then you got to hand it in. I'm like, there's no way. He's just not going to do that. She's like, I don't understand. Why wouldn't he do that? That's what you do. I'm like, I agree with you that we should suggest that to him and we should encourage that. Hey, you're going to have to talk to adults. Like that's going to be par for the course here when, going to school. But I was like, he's never going to do it. And she's like, why do you say? I was like, well, I never would. I was like, never in a million years would I talk to an adult, especially my teacher. Like I was terrified to talk to even barely talk to my grandparents. Like when you're a kid, I think a lot of times you just, it's awkward. It's awkward. You can't find the right words and you're not sure what to say or what to talk about. And so.
Right. Now, is he naturally into sports? And is he a natural in sports, I should say? Or have you found that like that's even something he's interested in?
Neither one of my kids care about sports. And my son recently was asking about football. And I went to a football meeting and stuff. And so he's been thinking about playing football. But he's been training here in the gym. Neither one of them really ever cared about sports. And it's actually really...
How do you feel about that? Being like so competitive and being into sports, like just because I know for me specifically too, my oldest, he's somewhat into it, but it's not the same. It's not the same experience. I'm already watching through him going through that process, and like, how do you feel like watching that?
Times are just different, man. I think when we grew up, I think that's what kids did. They played sports. And there's been many generations of children that haven't played sports, so I think they're going to be totally fine. And I think like, what did the sports do for you? They might have done absolutely nothing. They may have been more damaging than they were good. Like look, football, people are getting their heads bashed in playing football. People are getting concussions and stuff. I'm not saying I'm against football. I love it. I always have, and I always will. I love watching football. But at the same time, I'm not going to sweat it if my kids, if they don't care about sports. I have been teaching both of them since they were really little about nutrition and about having some sort of movement and fitness be part of your life, riding a bike, swimming, doing something. They both ride their bikes to school. They're both pretty active. They're both like doing stuff. We encourage them to, put stuff down and get outside and do stuff, do something with your friends and, get out and get moving. And there are a lot of great values there are a lot of great things that you can learn from a sport. As I was mentioning earlier, like part of knowing who you are is knowing who you're not. And when you're sometimes involved in some of these sports, you're kind of like, oh shit, that guy was a lot faster than me. And that girl was, it's kind of a good thing to realize you kind of where you stand in society, like your spot, like, are you this much better than everybody else at these things? But one thing I think that's happening that I see with children is maybe like they're a little bit more scared to try stuff than what I remember as a kid. And I don't know what that is. I don't know why. Like even my nieces and nephews, when they try something and they're not good at it, they just like, they're just gone.
I think it's because they get trophies all the time for everything. And the other thing I think is they're not bored. I mean, when I was a kid, I was bored. And so I just did shit.
You just kept playing basketball. You kept shooting hoops or whatever.
Yeah, because now kids are like, this sucks. Going to go get super entertained by my video games and electronics. They're just not bored. They just don't. They don't sit there and do nothing.
I'd agree with that. I think the boredom's probably the biggest factor. And I kind of hear kids say stuff like that. They'll just say like, oh, I'm not that good at that. It's like, well, shit, of course you're not. You never tried it before. Like you barely tried it. You tried it for 10 seconds.
All right.
I played ping pong with my, and these things, they take a lot of time. As a parent, like trying to teach a kid how to hit a ball or something, man, it could be agonizing. And trying to figure out
it can be frustrating.
How to play baseball with your kid is almost impossible because the ball's going to come back and hit you right in the balls every single time. And a lot of these things take time. I remember playing ping pong with my nephew. We call him Hambone. His name's Hamish. And he and I are going back and forth. And he's awful. He's like 3. He can barely see over the thing. He's just... But I was like, you know what I'm going to do? Because I was the youngest, I was the baby of the family. I'm just going to play with him for as long as he wants to do this for. However long it takes. Let's see what he's got,
Yeah.
And so we're playing forever, and he keeps hitting the ball in these weird spots. I got to like get under. He's being lazy. Like he won't help me get the ball when he can easily duck down and get it. Mm-hmm. I got no mobility whatsoever, so it's taking me forever to get the ball each time, and we keep going back and forth and going back and forth. We played for like an hour. And he's like, can we be done? I'm like, sure. I was waiting for whenever you wanted to be done with it. But then the next day we went back out. We played again, played for like a half an hour. And then, now he's like 5 now, but like now we play and we can actually play ping pong. We're actually going back and forth. And with my son and with my daughter, they never really expressed that much interest in any one thing that they wanted to really sit there and like learn it. My son has a piano in his room and he's been messing around with that. Yeah, he has a guitar. He messes around with that. He like teaches himself how to do shit through like YouTube. But I'm like, let's just see what he's interested in. Like, let's just see what kind of naturally comes to him and what he naturally wants to do. We had him try a couple things because I do think it's important. You
definitely
need to support your children, but you need to force them to do shit. Like, just like you need to maybe force them to eat a particular way. Like, yeah, of course they want ice cream, but you can't serve that up nonstop. And you're gonna have to figure out some different ways of protecting them. But probably the greatest way that you can show love to a child is through discipline. And that's the hardest thing. I think is the hardest thing. It's easier just to kind of like, oh, just let them watch cartoons or just, let them eat whatever, rather than like going over to them and being like, hey, you're done with the TV, shutting it off. Let me have your phone, take away the junk food or whatever they gotten themselves into. Like, man, that sucks. That takes a lot of energy.
It does. If you ever talk to adults who were kids that had no structure and no discipline, they'll tell you that they felt like their parents didn't care about them and that it was very difficult. So as much as you think, people think, oh, it's better if you let the kids do. No, kids thrive off of structure and knowing that you care enough to tell them to get off the TV, to not eat this, to do that. They know that you
Yeah, they want to know where they stand. That's what they want to know, where those boundaries are and those thresholds are. And you need to be able to, provide that for them, because then now they know, like, and they'll back off. And it's funny because we feel bad about it, but at the same time, you're providing structure in their life that they can carry on with, and it lowers the anxiety.
Yeah, the thing I'm real careful about is not, like, I'll introduce my kids to stuff, but not pushing them so hard that they automatically hate it because I'm the one that's pushing them.
Yeah.
So I've been like little by little. I mean, my kids know what I do, and they know that I've been in fitness for since they were born or whatever, since before. So they see I have a garage gym. They see me working out. I talk about it, and I wait for them to ask me. And so my son now is 13, and he's been asking me like, "Hey, so how do I put on muscle?" And I'm just like, I'm trying not to get fucking excited. I'm like, "Oh, well, it's a process of
downplaying it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You lift weights and okay." He's like, "Okay, cool." And then a couple of weeks later, he's like, "Hey, what does it mean when you say bulking?" And I'm like, "Oh." So I'm explaining to him. He's like, "I think I want to do a bulking program this summer." And I'm just like, fucking tear comes down. So I'm like, "We're gonna do that together, son. We'll do the bulking. Can you put me on a diet too?" And I'm like, "God, thank you for this wonderful gift." Has your kid expressed any interest in weights at all?
Yeah, my son, he's been lifting here for the last couple of weeks.
Oh, right.
And
Nice.
It's been really cool to see like how fast the improvements happen. He's
at that age, 15, they're like
he's moving
on natural anabolics.
Yeah, he's like moving around like 95 pounds like the first day, like on the bench for a couple reps. And then the next time he came in, he's doing it for like 15 reps. And it's just like, holy
damn,
immediate improvement. Yeah.
That took me till my 20s to get over that, dude. Like, seriously.
Yeah, he can probably bench like around 135 or 140.
Oh, that's
he's just,
nice.
Yeah, he's just I think that I don't know if he'd be like a naturally talented lifter. I do think that he would be stronger than a lot of his friends, kind of, right off the bat, which he's already proven that. But he and I had a similar situation where he was exposed to it through PE. They were, talking about lifting, and I showed him and his sister. I talked to them forever about. From the time they were kids, I would say, "Hey, you don't eat that; it makes you fat." Like I just made it plain and simple. I made it black and white. I didn't even try to sell it as like health, and didn't try to sell it as anything mental. I was like, "This makes you fat." Period. Just left it right there. As I got older, I started sharing more with them and not saying the word fat because I didn't want them to have a complex about that. But when they were young, they understood that, and that they started to learn. Like my daughter would like eat something. And I'd say, "Hey, you won't," she'd be done with like dinner or whatever. Say, "Hey, you want a cookie?" And she's like, "Nah, I already had one today." Because she kind of like learned. They kind of learned the rhythm. But I showed both of them how to lift. I was like, "Here's some basic exercises. Like I don't know anything else, so I'm gonna show you what I know. And if you guys want more, if you want to work out with me more, you want to learn more stuff, then we can do it." But I just showed him a couple exercises and left it at that. And then my son and he and I go on walks pretty much every night. Me, him, and my dad, and sometimes my daughter will come with us too. We're big proponents of the 10-minute walk around my house. We do them all the time. And we'll go for a 20-minute walk or so at night, and we get done with this walk, and my dad goes and does his own thing, and my daughter gets back in the house. My son's like, "Hey, Dad," he's like, "we've been lifting in school." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." I'm not saying anything, and he's just kind of like pausing, and he wanders around a lot. He's like walking back and forth. He's like pacing, and he's like, "I think I want to like lift more. I want to work on it."
You tried not to jump out of your shoe.
Yeah. And I'm like the Rocky music starts playing in my head, and I was like, "Well," I said, maybe we'll go this weekend. Just like try to make it totally seem like nothing, And then, that weekend I woke him up and brought him here, and then he's been kind of lifting ever since.
Oh, that's freaking awesome.
Wow, that's exciting.
And I asked him, I'm like, "Do you like it?" And he's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Did you have fun?" He's like, "Yeah." "Are you sore?" "I don't care."
I don't care.
We, on both your podcast and our podcast, we talked a lot about desired outcome, self-awareness. You talk a lot about self-talk. I would love to hear something specific that you have been working on internally yourself this past year or two that you probably have a lot of conversations with yourself about.
Yeah. I chat with myself more than anybody else. That's for sure. So when I talk about, this internal talk, I think some people might think it's a little bit weird. Some people might be down with it. And some people might not have any idea what the hell I'm talking about. You quickly realize how much internal talk there is once you start to realize how negative you can be. And, one of my goals is to go through a whole day and not be negative one time, but it's very hard. It's very, very difficult. And I try to even change, even with like messing around with somebody, I try to even change that, because I've learned that having two older brothers growing up and, going through professional wrestling, like you learn how to really chop people down like hard. And it's fun, right? Like, cause it's banter. It's like, we're just buddies, man. Just, hey, relax. But I had to, over a period of time, recognize that, okay, some of these people on social media don't know who I am. I still make mom jokes. I can't help that. If there's a good mom joke to be had, I got to say it. But
they never get old.
Yeah, they never get old.
Like your mom.
Yeah, that's right. Boom.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I try to be as positive as I can, because I'm like, you know what? What if this came at this person the wrong way at the wrong time, and it cut them down or hurt their feelings? Like, I don't want to do that. I don't ever mean to do that. And so I'm like, that's not who I am as a person. I don't want to, portray hate, and I don't want to be hateful towards anybody. And so the internal dialogue I have with myself is mainly just to figure out ways of being positive. And the reason for it is that other people will be plenty negative for you and towards you, that you got plenty of supply of that. And I actually like to use a lot of negative energy as fuel, which can be a little bit dangerous. It's like using some nitrous. It can give you a nice turbo boost, but you can also end up flying off the road and going into the wall, right? But I've used it my whole life. I've used it to squat 1,080. I've used it to bench 854 pounds. And it's not this idea of, I'm a raging lunatic or anything, but it's just this idea of, I need the newspaper clipping. I need the Bill Belichick. Like the Patriots somehow, some way, every single game convince themselves that everyone else is out to get them and that they're somehow the underdog. Like, how do they do that every year? It's like you're going to your 9th Super Bowl. No one's caught on to this, But Bill Belichick always
doubted us.
Yeah, Bill Belichick always pulls out a quote that someone said in the other person's locker room, and he puts it up in their locker room. And it's just, I feel like in some ways that gives me like a superpower. It gives me like a leg up on some people. So, as a kid, I was labeled as dumb. I use that as leverage all the time. I use that as fuel. I use that as calories, if you will. That's something that fuels me. That's something that drives me. That's something that still to this day, is part of the reason why I wake up at 4 a.m. is to try to get out in front of the day. And on a more positive note, it's to get out in front of the day and to make sure all my other tasks are done. It's to make sure that the day is fulfilled the way that I want to. What I think is really important to grasp is, if you live each day, like let's say that you want to have like a 10 out of 10 day, and you actually think about this for a second. You write some things down. What does a 10 out of 10 day look like for you? Maybe it's that you spent some time with a loved one, and you spent some time with your kids, and you did A, B, and C. You fulfilled all your requirements nutritionally. You got in a good workout. You were nice to your friends. You called your mom, or what, like just these things, right? You handled all these things in a day. And when you kind of sit down and you're like, okay, that was a cool day. I did everything I needed to. There's nothing in this day that I'm like, I'll just do it tomorrow. You got everything done that you wanted to do for that day. To me, that's really fulfilling. And I think it's a good concept for a lot of people to try to embrace. Is you want to try to have the best possible day that you can. And like, how do you do that? Where does that start? In the beginning of the podcast, I talked about a pre-workout, and I talked about how it could last like a whole week, because my pre-workout is my last failure or my last success with a particular goal or something that I had in mind, something I wanted to do. If my goal was to bench 400 pounds and I missed it on a Thursday, my like recovery for that starts right then and there. And I start thinking about that. How am I going to get that next week? Or how am I going to rework things over the next couple of weeks to make sure that I get that? And all that starts for me with not waking up early, because I think people see this message that I wake up early. And then some people get frustrated, like, man, you're teaching people not to sleep. That's not at all what I'm trying to preach to anyone. I do think, though, that there is something special and there is something magical about learning the discipline of getting yourself to bed on time, whatever time that means for you, for the allotted amount of time that you need to rest and recover for that particular day. And that's how you set yourself up for success. And that's how I think you can set yourself up to have the most fulfilled day that you can. I always share this message of do more, be more. The more that you can do, the more things you can handle, the more things that you can deflect. How is anyone at this table going to like hurt The Rock's feelings? Mm-hmm. Can't, right? Because he's done more. He is more. He does a lot. He is a lot. He's a big deal to a lot of people. And there's not, we can throw something out at him and say this or that or whatever we want to, but it's probably not going to work. And a lot of us over a period of time, the more stuff that we do, the more we'll be able to handle. And then we have shitty situations in life. Maybe we'll be able to handle them and deal with them a little bit better.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the thing that you've been working on most is this kind of positive attitude or positive reinforcement. Is it more related to how you project yourself to others, like on social media, or is it more like self-love? Like, are you somebody who's hard on yourself so much where I'm stupid or that was a dumb idea, and so you're more working on that part of you? Or is it more like you're quick to fire at somebody who says some shit on social media?
Yeah, the social media side of things is a weird one. That one's a little harder to answer. And so like sometimes I'll even just go off social media because my health is important. Like my recovery from stuff is important. And social media makes it a little bit difficult for me to recover from the things that I need to do every single day. I train, every time I train pretty damn hard. I'm still trying to push some big weights. I still have some lofty goals. And so I can't allow, like, is social media enhancing what I'm doing or is it hurting? You know, how does it help? How does it hurt? These are questions I ask myself throughout the day whenever I'm going to do anything. Have a cup of coffee, eat anything. Even just someone calls me up at 7 o'clock, says, hey, you want to meet me at 8 to go to dinner? Hold on a second. Hey, Mark, how does this help? How does this hurt? You know, that's what I'm thinking. That's the dialogue in my head, because I'm like, if I go out at 8 and then I'm back at 10 and then I just ate, and then I usually try to finish my food 2 hours before I go to bed, and now it'd be 11 and 12 and leaks into the next day. And so the anxiety, a lot of these things that people are suffering from, I don't want to just sell it off and say that, like, hey man, if you just did the shit you need to, that you'd be fine. But if you just did the shit that you need to, you'd probably be fine. You know, if you did the dishes when you were supposed to, if you made your bed when you're supposed to, if you ate the correct foods, if you had a 10 out of 10 day, if you did all the stuff that you were supposed to do, it's going to require, life is going to require you to do the things that you don't want to do when you normally don't want to do them. When you sit on the couch, you just got home from a long day and you're thinking to yourself, oh, time for a 10-minute walk. That kind of creeps in. You're like, I shouldn't be sitting here scrolling through Instagram. That's when there's absolutely no more decisions to be made. And you just walk your ass out the door and you go do that 10-minute walk, because you're trying to create new habits and new disciplines. And I think that a lot of people will feel a lot more fulfilled and they'll feel a lot better about themselves as they continue to achieve more. In terms of the message out to social media, I don't mind being negative. I don't mind being a dick, and I don't mind telling people like this is, because it's my social media and it's my thoughts. These are my thoughts that I developed in this way. And I hope that you enjoy them, and I hope that you get something out of them. I hope that they're entertaining, but if they hit you the wrong way, then I don't know how to help you, because I'm never intending on hurting anybody. I'm never intending on being a negative in anybody's life. I'm never intending to pull anything away. all I'm trying to do is add to someone's life. So if I made some posts the other day about like fasting and I showed like no food, you know, like I'm going to do some ridiculous, weird stuff sometimes. And just, that's what I felt like sharing. So that's what I'm going to do.
Excellent. What's in store for the future with you and with your company, with your business?
Yeah, with Slingshot, you know, we're always creating new products. We got a bunch of things in the works, but you know, it's just pretty much business as usual. It's just trying to communicate to the customers on what it is that we have. We have a lot of products. The Slingshot is a supportive upper body device for bench press, push-ups, and dips. The Slingshot and the hip circle are things that have been copied by nearly every fitness brand that you can think of. The Slingshot's a little bit harder to copy because it is patented. The hip circle, it's a circle, so I wasn't able to patent it, but you see everyone sells a booty band.
I see the booty bands. Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah, everyone sells, and makes me feel great. You know, like, so what? I mean, there's no shortage. There's not a shortage of money, you know, to be made. There's not a shortage of success out there. There's not an unlimited amount of money to be made, I'm sure, but I don't care. You know, I don't care if other people are executing on some things. I'm just hoping that I can figure out a way to execute better. That's where my focus needs to be. My focus can't be on, oh man, these people are like, it's easy to sit there and go, everyone's copying me. Well, it's not everyone, first of all. And secondly, it's like, you know, who are these people? And let them copy you. That's great. You know, in professional wrestling, there's only so many different stories you can tell. And if you go out and do a match and you go out and do a match and you go out and do a match, what are the odds that my match is similar? Probably is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But what if I do it 10 times better than you guys? No one's going to remember what you did. No one's going to remember the shit that you guys did, right? They're not going to they're not going to even feel the same way about it. They might not even recognize it as being the same thing at all. And so some of the things that we're trying to do here at Slingshot are we're trying to, you know, turn this into a juggernaut of a company where the things that we do are different. They're so different that other people can't follow it. They can't follow it up. They can't figure it out. And the things that we have that we're about to start to do, other people just won't do it. They won't be able to afford it. It'll be too hard for them to execute. We're going to kind of Zappos and Stitch Fix all of our products. So basically, we've got a pretty loose return policy as is. But you'll be able to order like 4 or 5 knee sleeves at a time if you want.
Oh, right.
You send back, like, you're like, I'm not sure, man. They got a bunch of different knee sleeves. I don't know what fits and what doesn't fit. And so what we're trying to create with something like that is we're trying to create as if you were coming into our store, which is here in West Sacramento, and you were trying on knee sleeves. And I'm like, oh, you know, you should try this one on. And you're like, well, I don't really want one that's that stiff. I don't really squat that much weight anymore. I just want something that's warm. And I'd say, oh, we'll try this one on. So it would be the kind of similar process. You would pay for however many knee sleeves you wanted to order, and then you could ship them back very easily. So those are some things that we're working on executing, and just, you know, like I don't, you guys mentioned competition earlier. Like I have kind of a weird thing where I can get competitive with people on some stuff, but I don't think you and I reserving our energy to like lock horns is a fucking great idea. You know, like I think that we're both going to get like beat up from it, and we're both going to like eventually kind of lose from it, right? It's going to like suck. Like maybe he beats me on one thing, I beat him on another. But if I'm working out with you guys, which hopefully you guys will come back someday and we'll get a workout in, you know, if you're using 150 pounds on a lat pull down or something, I'm not going to try to do 160, right. You know, or, you know, I don't care about stuff like that. I try not to waste my time with that, because I feel like it's easy to look at the word competition and being competitive as if it's a positive thing, but it has so many negatives around it as well. As I was mentioning to you guys earlier, like you think about the people that haven't been competitive, the people that have gone outside, the free thinkers, the people have done their own thing, their own way. Well, shit, man, they're extremely successful. Not only successful, they go down in history forever, and they make monuments of those people because they thought so differently that they didn't even think about, I don't even want to do battle with you.
Right. Well, they may be competitive more with themselves than anything.
Right. They're competitive maybe in their own way, or they look at competition maybe in a slightly different way. But as I've mentioned to you guys earlier, like if you want to be competitive, maybe you start a restaurant and do what everybody else does and sell all the same shit that they do. Or maybe you start a YouTube channel and start hustling some t-shirts or something like that. or you can kind of Amazon it and be a free thinker and do something that no one else has ever done before.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Great.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was a lot of fun, man.
Great
It's been
time,
a blast, brother. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Mind Pump. If your goal is to build and shape your body, dramatically improve your health and energy, and maximize your overall performance, check out our discounted RGB Super Bundle at mindpumpmedia.com. The RGB Super Bundle includes MAPS Anabolic, MAPS Performance, and MAPS Aesthetic. 9 months of phased expert exercise programming designed by Sal, Adam, and Justin to systematically transform the way your body looks, feels, and performs. With detailed workout blueprints and over 200 videos, the RGB Super Bundle is like having Sal, Adam, and Justin as your own personal trainers, but at a fraction of the price. The RGB Super Bundle has a full 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can get it now plus other valuable free resources at mindpumpmedia.com. If you enjoy this show, please share the love by leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes and by introducing Mind Pump to your friends and family. We thank you for your support, and until next time, this is Mind Pump.